Okay, I'll start us off. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, The Art of Successful Project Implementation. My name is Adam Bullion, and I'm the General Manager of Marketing for PracticeEvolve. Now, you'll be delighted to know today that there is no product demonstrations, so we can focus on the expertise of David Baskerville, who's conducting the webinar today. We've clients joining us today from Baskerville, Drummond, PracticeEvolve, and also InfoTrack. So let me first start by introducing the different brands to you. Starting with Baskerville Drummond. Baskerville Drummond are the leading independent legal IT business strategy and finance consultancy, specializing in advising law firms and legal IT technology providers. They bring operational hands-on know-how as well as managerial and consulting experience, meaning they consider not only the technical IT aspects of any project, but also the broader business needs and also the human element, which I think David will talk a little bit about today. InfoTrack is the home of digital conveyancing, a powerful suite of solutions from client onboarding and searches to post-completion and e-signature services. They digitize the entire conveyancing process to assure compliance and productivity. The technology they provide takes on the burden of paper-intensive, demanding administrative tasks within a single award-winning platform. InfoTrack empower firms to focus on delivering an exceptional client experience with every transaction. PracticeEvolve, which is obviously the business I work for, we understand that the path to perfection is a constantly evolving journey. Provide progressive legal business management tech for your future, employing feature-rich software and providing an unconditional commitment to service. We empower firms to manage customer relationship, case management, document management, accounts, and more with a clear pathway to the cloud. I'm sure every webinar now starts with the words further to the events of last year and plays a little bit back of the COVID back to the markets. And I don't think there's going to be much difference today, in fairness. It's fair to say many trends that we've experienced over the last year are just accelerations of past behaviors. In some cases, we've probably covered a decade in weeks. So further to the events of last year, businesses are having to learn faster than ever before in order to adapt to the business and ways of working. What that means is a need for IT projects, transformation projects, and better software to be implemented at a faster pace. And that's why I'm delighted to have partnered with InfoTrack and to bring you the expertise and the knowledge of David today to talk through the art of successful project implementations. As the name suggests, David actually runs Baskerville Drummond and has over 18 years experience in this field. David today is going to discuss managing change within law firms, identifying common challenges, and provide firms with 5 key factors required to ensure the project runs efficiently and smoothly. Now, before I hand over to David, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Q&A button within the Zoom software. If you have any questions, because obviously you can hear us, but we can't hear you, please use that button and we'll try and answer those questions as we go through. And if we don't catch on to them, we'll answer those at the end. So, David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Adam. Thanks for a good introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to try not to use the C word at all during today's presentation. So if I do that, please feel free to pull me up for it. Just as a very, very quick introduction to us, as Adam said, what we do is we help firms review their current situation. We help them find an answer to any problems or any strategic things that they want to achieve. And then we'll help the firms implement those recommendations or select or systems we advise them to purchase. The end goal really for us is to become the long-term advisors for firm, and we've now got several law firms where we are their virtual IT director and support them through strategy through implementations. What we're going to talk about today is how firms embark on IT projects, how they go about making selection projects, and most importantly, why do those things where firms get really, really excited about new technology, new products, why is it so many technical projects in law firms go from being what I call a silver bullet, this is a solution that's going to answer all of our problems, and then just ends up being a disappointed overhead. So it goes from being a value add to be something that costs the firm an awful lot without a lot of recognition of the advantages. And in particular, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the two main factors for that. And I always see them as being the poor selection of IT. So it could be that firms have jumped at a sales pitch and gone, yeah, that's going to answer everything without really understanding what the application can do, or they don't implement the software very well. And those are the two main areas, selection and implementation or adoption of solutions. As Adam said, we're happy to take questions as we go. If you drop a thing in Q&A, or equally right at the end of the presentations, we'll have a mop-up session if something comes later. So before we go into these things about selection and implementation, just want to take a little thought as to why do IT projects happen in any way in law firms. And there's sort of like 4 reasons, I think, that law firms embark on IT projects. And this is where we get that thing here that a lot of firms at the moment have been forced to change their IT. Now, there is 2 reasons for that, 2 main factors, and the top one is probably the most one in terms of PMSs, where vendors, and certainly this isn't, by the way, anything to do with PracticeEvolve, it's just a general observation on the market, is vendors have got a history of buying competition and end-of-lifing solutions, or they'll say, we've got a funky new solution, you've got to move to that, and we're going to turn off our old one. And what that drives is firms being forced to change their major applications, and we're seeing an awful lot of that in the mid-market. And I think 2 years ago, when we did some research, we found that 60% of the top 200 firms are actually on end-of-life or systems that had not got a long-term life. So there's a huge pressure on firms to change. And the one time I'm going to use the C word is there are things that happen in the real world which force firms to change the way they operate. And as Adam touched on, the COVIDization, if you like, of what firms have had to do to adapt to the environment have been dramatic. So those are the 2 things that are forced, that are making you do things that you might necessarily not have planned to do. The second thing that's forcing firms to doing or forcing firms to start projects is what I call they feel the need to do something. And I think if you look at what the legal press was saying a couple of years ago, everything was AI, everything was investing tech startups. And it's very much the fashion for firms to jump into what I would call immature AI solutions. But it was a feeling they had to do something because everyone else was doing it. What never ever really talks about in the legal press is what are the real world examples of adopting this technology, what advantages did it give us, and what's the long-term benefits. It's all about the hype to get onto the treadmill before it runs out and everyone else is doing it, so you must do it. The third element, and this is actually quite rare in a lot of law firms, it's when they stand back and say, okay, as our law firm, we want to do X, Y, or Z. What technology do we need to enable us to do that more efficiently and better? So the joining up of your technical decisions to make sure it underpins the business strategy. And I would say that is less in a law firm. We are still very much in that forced and feeling stage. We're seeing more firms trying to get to the plan stage. But again, it is very often that the business has come up with a strategy, but not thought through what technology can help us do this in a different way than our way we would have done it before technology was introduced. And the last bit is what I call the true innovation. How is technology going to enhance and change we do business? Now, again, I find that that's actually quite rare in law firms, because a good example of this is where firms have the option. Well, a good example is we do a lot of residential conveyancing. We're going to buy case manager. We're going to put it in. And what we find there is that firms have just gone, right, residential conveyancing, we'll buy case man, we'll buy it. And the number of firms that I talk to are very disappointed in case management systems, because they've gone into it thinking, we need a case management system because we're doing conveyancing, we need to make it more profitable, without going through that process of saying, what workflows we need, what are our standard precedents, how are we going to make this work, how is this business process going to support ours? And what I actually quite often find when you start talking to law firms is they've got a plethora of case management systems to do different things, but they've never been used because the people who are using them aren't bought into using them, or indeed they feel that they can run the cases quicker without them. So unless you've got a really, really big volume, case management in law firms has not necessarily been a success. Part of that actually in regional firms is still that there's a lot of pride that people have in the letters they send out and the wording that they use. And I've met firms who are trying to implement case management systems, but they still haven't even got an agreed new terms of business document because people change it every time. So if you can't processize and agree standard things, case management isn't going to help your business. And in those cases that, IT can be part of your answer, but actually a lot of the time it can be part of your problem that you're trying to put a round hole into a square peg. So that's why firms embark on projects and why there's sometimes some challenges. Moving on to like the cynical view of IT, if you like, is this is a thing that I've asked at a conference before, and I did a raise of hand. It's obviously quite hard to do that here, but it'd be interesting in putting in the Q&A on who disagrees with this. Is quite often we find, and again, no reflection on the hosts of today, but quite often we find that vendors are very sales led. They come into a problem when they're talking to law firms and they promise the earth. They absolutely say, we're going to fix all of your problems, whatever, very much so what do I need to say to get this deal sold? I've got an example of a client I've been working with who bought a system 5 years ago. And one of the partners said to me less than 6 months ago, he wished the system just did what it did in the sales demos, because actually it's still not capable of some of those things that were shown as a working system. And I think there is a lack of trust growing up between people who are buying technology and the vendors, because the vendors obviously got to sell to keep in business, but often they sell something which isn't actually viable. And we do see this churn where firms are very much interested in what's the next deal, not looking after their existing client base. And that is really, really clear in the legal market that's happened. There is a number of firms we start talking to who've actually bought technology which could do what they need it to, but actually have never implemented it properly because the vendor has effectively sold and moved on, and they're sort of left with a system not knowing what to do. Equally, law firms going into the purchase cycle, not thinking about what's the total cost of owning technology. And by owning technology, I don't mean what's the purchase price, what's the annual support charges. I mean, what is it going to cost us to ensure that this technology is useful for our business? And that means, do we need it customized? Do we need somebody to keep it maintained and updated with precedents? Do we need somebody to train it? Do we need to look at how it interfaces with other applications? There is a constant cost of ownership of any solution that you buy. And going into that, what we found when we talk to people, and okay, look, it's a made-up stat, but it's there to make a message. Whenever we start an engagement, we start talking to firms about the solutions they've got and how they use them. I would say it's very, very rare that somebody says, yes, we've got this piece of software and it does everything that we want and need, or that they know what the functionality of the systems that they've got could actually do. And I think the reasons for that is that firms will buy software and then they move on to the next project without really going, okay, thinking about that cost of ownership question. They're very much, okay, we've got a project, we bought it, we've implemented it, move on, what's next? And very, very rarely after a project go live, maybe a year after, do they sit back and say, okay, why did we do that project? What were we aiming to do? And did we actually achieve that? Can we give ourselves a tick? Are we actually now going to a year on? Is that product still relevant for what we're now doing as a business? How can it help us? And, when you're helping a firm buy things, quite often the partnership are very clear on wanting a business case to justify the investment. And you put all that sort of stuff together, but nobody then says a year or two after, right, let's build out the business case. How does it work out for us? And what then happens is that projects slide into this sort of like business as usual. They become an overhead and people forget about the objectives that they were brought in to do. So I think that's a real challenge. And for any investment, I'd question yourselves, if you think about the projects that you've brought in or the solutions you've purchased for your firm, have you ever backwards looked at it and said, is that still the right thing? Are we getting value? Have we measured that it's done the things that we thought it was going to do? And that leads me to my sort of like assumption and, you know, my experience that whenever I talk to a law firm, they talk about, you know, IT is not great, it's not very good for us, and people are generally disappointed in their IT situation. But when I drill into that, it always seems to come down to they thought they were buying something that they didn't end up getting, so they've not selected the appropriate technology, or they bought something but nobody knows how to use it, or nobody can remember what it should be doing for them, and that's down about that in selection and adoption. So, and those two, if you can address the first, the second one becomes easier and more justifiable and easier to manage. So I'm just going to spend some time now looking at the selection and how to go about it. And it's something I call the circle of despair. And I think anybody who's been operating in law firms for a long time will see this, where we see that the system is bought, is put in, everyone gets really excited by it. And then 6 months after go live, people get disappointed by it. And then a year in, they're very disappointed by it and we go back out to market. So you end up with this circle where you go, okay, this doesn't work for us, let's go and find something new. Everyone gets excited. We get the new thing and it doesn't work. So we go round and round and round the recount. And I think the image on the right is a really good one. It's something that you'll see on LinkedIn, but it's a very good indication of how simply this happened. That, you know, a customer goes into buying software thinking this system's going to fix their world and all the problems that are in their mind of the business, which the person who's then selling the software picks out the bits which enable them to say, yeah, we can do that. And a lot of things get forgotten. And as you go through that layer from initial vision through that project process, you end up with something completely different, because the customer starts off with unrealistic aims and ambitions. And actually the product does something quite differently. And at the end, you go from a 3-step ladder to a tire and a rope, which is actually what everybody wants in their lives to make themselves happy. And I think just to summarize that, you know, in our market, I just do get bored of people saying that lawyers aren't into technology, because in my experience, actually, most firms have got some lawyers who are passionate about technology, and actually, I think lawyers want to use technology. I think it is a myth that law firms don't like technology. I think they do. I think what they don't like is technology which doesn't do what they expect it to, and they don't like having to change their business models to adapt to technology. So those are the two challenges, because I think part of that is that basically lawyers are people who don't like being told what to do. And I think a lot of software tells people how to operate. And when you have software which supports people in operating, there's a change in focus there. But I do find, despite being trained as pessimistic people and always looking for problems, the legal brain, when it comes to technology, is actually sometimes like an excited child. It's sort of like everyone's really excited by technology. And I've got an example of this sort of challenge where when I was at Tollers, we created a training scheme, and it was based around everybody having a standard level. Things like being able to do pivot tables in Excel or bulleted numbers in Word and all that sort of stuff that just enables lawyers to become sort of self-supporting. And nobody was turning up to it. We found that the partners were actually saying to the staff, don't bother going on that, we don't need to do it. And we just couldn't get buy-in. And then one day I walked into the boardroom and I found half the equity partners sitting around playing Angry Birds on their new iPhones. And, I'd just literally come out of a difficult meeting saying we couldn't get any engagement. And I found that these equity partners have been in this room playing Angry Birds for nearly an hour. And when I asked them what they were up to, it's like, well, we've got an iPhone, we've got to learn how to use the touchscreen. And, they came up with all sorts of excuses, but it's always been a lesson to me. If you can get technology that excites people and they want to learn, they will find time to do it. And the challenge we've got is to take obviously the touchscreen iPhone 3, I think it was, so it's a long time ago. It's a new thing now, but you've got to get that technology which excites people, makes them want to do something, and the difference in attitude becomes becomes amazing. So the reason I call it silver bullet optimism is I genuinely believe no lawyer goes into a project thinking it's going to fail. They think all technology problems are going to make their life better. They may not understand exactly what they're buying because of the technical spiel. They may have greater expectations than they should have on technology, but I genuinely believe that this saying that lawyers don't like technology is a problem. I actually think it's the other way around. They are too optimistic about what business technology can do for them. And I think also when firms go into the selection process, they're not selfish enough, which is a very, very strange thing to say. When you're in there, and I've sat in hundreds of presentations and selection projects over the sort of demonstrations over the years, and what I'm always surprised about is how trusting lawyers are of the salespeople. So they basically go, yeah, they've told us it can do it, that'll do. And that's very much a personal trust issue. They look at the personal, they like the people, and they buy from people, which is not a bad thing at all. But actually, they don't focus enough. They very much become focused on what that person is selling them, not actually what do I need the system to do. And that again is about the split there. So whenever you go in to buy something, you have to be ruthlessly selfish. It isn't about what the salesman's got to sell you. It's about what you need to buy. And I think that's a really, really important that it is that element. So having a very robust procurement process is essential, because you can get waylaid and you can see things in demos and think, wow, that'd be fantastic for us. But you've got to always remember, what is it you're starting out to achieve with your project? Why are you doing it? And what are the business advantages? Because unless you do that, and unless you pair that back to what you're seeing, you will always end up with a mismatch on expectations. And I think the other thing I always say with selection criteria is treat it like a personal relationship. It is very much like a personal relationship. Each party has its needs. Each party has its hopes and aspirations. But actually, the marriage of joining two things together has got to work for both parties. And sometimes some technology just isn't right for you because there is a mismatch on your expectations and their expectations, and that relationship, because it all should be about relationship, will not work for you. So moving from selection into adoption, and I've already touched on a couple of these points, but it's a very simplistic view I've got here, but quite often, just because you've bought technology doesn't mean you're going to transform into the sales pitch given. And a really good example of that is I worked with a firm once who were a decent sized regional law firm. They were doing well. They were in that sort of 10 to 15 million turnover bracket. But they went out and bought iManage and Drummond, which again, not knocking those as technical sales choices. But when I drilled into why they bought, Drummond, iManage and Matasphere, which are very sort of top end and expensive products, normally you'd see them in the top 100, not in sort of like 200 size firm, is I said, well, everyone else who's in the top 50 has bought these, and we aspire to be that big. So we bought the technology to get us there. And I could sort of see why, but actually they've got no business plan around that. They've gone out and bought the technology because that's what everyone else used. And they hadn't underpinned that with a growth strategy for the business. They weren't looking for bolt-ons. They weren't looking to build in additional work streams. There was no business strategy to enable the growth. They just thought by having the same technology, they would be able to grow. And it's quite a strange model. So again, I call that the optimistic view, that and it is, the example I just gave you is quite extreme, but quite often when I talk to people about why they've got sort of technology, it's very much like, our competitors down the road bought it, so we thought we needed to have it as well, which is a strange one. And I think the other thing that people are very disappointed about, if you like, when they take on new projects, is that they expect this linear road that we buy a product and it's going to go live and it's fine. And actually, the reality of technology projects is it's a journey. We not meander, but we go between points on a plan. And you can have target go lives, you can have sort of like aims to things that you're trying to achieve at the end of it. But during the project, you will find unexpected things that you need to deal with. It may be that something simple, that somebody's forgotten about a certain process that needs to be done. It could be that you have sort of requirements on reporting that come out of it for clients or internal. So you need to make sure that your technical projects are treated like a journey, that you're going to have mid-stage goals, you're going to get there, you know what your end vision is, but you're going to manage closely between point A and point B, and then B to C, rather than just expecting we're going to buy the software and it's going to go live in one big jump. So it's very important that your projects are dynamic, especially when you're looking at large-scale project implementation. So it's not unusual for most of our projects to take between 12 and 18 months from the date of contract signing to go live. And during that time, the system will have changed because there'll be software updates. Your business will have changed undoubtedly because personnel would have changed, or you've decided to do a new part of work. So these things need to be dynamic and flexible. And the last part there is, last 2 points there on the screen. So I don't read from the slides, but the points I would pull out there, the last two, is getting your stakeholders really brought into the project so that people in the business know who from the business is leading on, who's the champion for your technology projects, is really important. Projects that you're seen as just being IT and driven by the IT department are destined to fail within a law firm. And firms pay lip service to training, and everyone talks about how important the training is, but actually it's still the case that a lot of firms don't release their staff to have training pre-go live, post-go live, and it is always a battle for the training departments to get engagement from people to actually attend to their training sessions. So it is really important that training just isn't lip service, that it is actually truly properly done. So moving on to these sort of barriers, why aren't firms able to adopt systems? Is, it's a bit of a cliche, but it is true also. The staff don't like change. They don't like having things done to them. So whenever you start a large scale project, if the staff feel that they're having things done to them rather than they're involved and they can see why things are happening, you're going to get resilience. And it's very important that you consider marketing to your staff as if you're marketing to the outside world. If you can consider your internal marketing or messaging, or how you're going to keep your staff up to date, getting them on board, seeing early demos and feeling in there is really important. And I think the other thing that absolutely kills any technology dead in the water, any technical project, is bad user experience. Be that like the system's slow to open, whether it crashes or whatever. So if you've got a system which is not performing well when you're testing it, you have to delay go live. I've seen several very good projects which we've come in to do like a recovery for after go live. The technology itself is fine, but actually there's some problems in its setup, or the infrastructure wasn't adequate. And that has actually killed that product's reputations in the firm before you get started. So making sure the system works as it should do before you go live is really done. And the other element in law firms is the buy-in from the leadership. It's really hard managing this in a law firm where obviously partners are business owners, but I've seen many project really struggle by the flippant comments of one partner, really struggling. We've got a example where you're going down a project and you're implementing a certain system and everyone agrees, and the partner goes, oh well, we weren't bother really doing that. And as soon as a partner says something like that, you only need to say it once in an offhand way, you'll find that the whole team just go, oh well, partner says we don't have to do it, we're not going to bother. And it is amazing, those little things. So getting that leadership and getting the partnership on board is essential to make this work. And it's again a bit of a cliche, but the loose lips saves lives. But you can see projects sunk by projects saying the wrong thing in the wrong way and derailing the project. So just moving into sort of conclusions for today, and there's no mistake that my top 3 takeaways from today are all related to your selection, because in my experience, when technology projects go well, it's because there's been a good, robust selection and everyone understands why we're buying the system and how it's going to work for us. Where every time I've seen a project go well, the selection has not been as good as it should be. So making sure before you go to market that you clearly understand what it is you're trying to achieve as a business and what your expectations are of the new system, whatever it be, are essential. I mean, we're not talking of thousands of pages of document here, but we just need to have something that everyone can go, yes, that's what we mean by this new system, and that's what we're going to get because we've got it. We should make sure that technology addresses that. We should make sure that whatever we buy is going to tick boxes off what we try to do. Now, certainly when you look at technology, they will offer things which are over and above what you're looking to do, and that's fantastic. And that is really good that you can have value add through that selection process. But always try to remember, if you're looking for a system that does 1, 2, and 3, if you're having a demonstration and one of the systems does 4 and 5, but only does 3, then actually it's not actually doing what you set out to do. Now, it might mean you then go back and say, actually, was that really what we want to do? But it's about saying, okay, we know we bought the system that's going to help us doing it. And I think that's why it's important you have that list so you can then select them. And the last bit, and the reason I see dead technology, is that there's this concept of buying something, turning it on, and it's all going to be fine. Nobody thinks about that long-term ownership. So, wherever you've got technology in your business, if you basically write a list down of all the technology that you have and prioritize it as that's essential to our business, we don't really, that's really important to our business, or it's a commodity, we don't really mind about that. And to give you an examples of those, I would say if you've outsourced your IT, it's essential. If you've got a post-room scanning system, it could be important. But if it's just a printer on a desk, it's a commodity. You can go out and buy a different one tomorrow and it doesn't really matter. So the ones which are the essential to your business, you should be regularly meeting the suppliers, keeping up to date with what you're doing on, having a two-way dialogue. If it's only important, you might just talk to them a couple of times a year. And if it's not important to your business, there's no point to engage the supplier at all. But make sure you spend your time appropriately with the suppliers who can make your business better. And my final conclusion, if you like, is just a summary, is that projects will fail if they're seen as IT projects within a law firm. It is essential that everything you try to do, you have a strong business stakeholder who can really get behind the projects in those boardroom decisions and get all the partnership on board and make sure that all the thoughts are captured and dealt with. And it's that old trio. You can't just have technology on your own every day. It is a thing of people, process, and technology. The three things working together is what you've got to be focused on throughout your project. And that is the final slide. If we've got any questions or comments.
Thanks, David. A few sort of questions, observations, and discussion points, I think here. So just word these correctly. So just, talking about the expectations of law firms and being clear around what the software needs to be done. In your experience, do you think firms are buying the tech on what they need for the now rather than considering the future, and do you end up having to try and drive them towards thinking about the future as well?
Yes, very much so. I think going back right to that slide at the beginning, if I just whiz back, thinking about why people go into why people do this in the first place. Most businesses are still going to market for new technology because they're forced or they feel that they need to do something. There is a growing number of people who are going because it's planned, that are thinking, we've got these things coming up. But certainly it is very much we are doing this reactively to a situation now, and it is very important, and one of the things we do. So, okay, what's your 3-year, 5-year plan, and try to get them to think about those longer term elements. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then, do you think? I mean, in terms of the training, and I think the training is fundamentally important here. But in terms of the training, you talk about the training. Should that training be done internally, or should firms be looking to the vendors to come in and regularly train on new elements or features and benefits and so on? And is there a lack of trust there? Is there something that's broken along the way that prevents firms from bringing the vendor into train?
I think the answer is it is part and part. So a vendor will never understand fully how a firm is using their system, because obviously a lot of these systems are so customizable, especially around workflow areas and custom screens, that a vendor won't be able to keep up with what every single client is doing. And I think this is something that has changed since COVID. Before COVID, the vendor's attitude was, we'll come and do you a demo or an update on our system and we'll charge you a day's consultancy rate. And one of the things that I've noticed in the market over the last year is much more vendors giving free webinars and demos and updates of their system. I think it's a really, really helpful thing to do. So I think there will always be an element of a firm needing their internal trainers to show best practice and how the firm should be using the system as it's configured. But equally, I think it's very, very healthy for that trainer and the wider firm to see product update webinars, or actually, have you tried doing this in our system? And I think that really helps with the creative juices and gets, actually, from a vendor's point of view, it's very powerful because it gets buy-in and stickiness with clients, because the clients can see that they're showing how the system can be used better. So,
yeah. Okay, thank you. There's a question here that says, I work within an IT department and start putting projects together, among other things. How do we separate the project from its being seen as an IT project if I work in the IT department? Any tips on doing this? So I think what the ask there is, how do I make sure that the firm doesn't just see it as an IT project, but they see it as a firm-wide project? Any tips?
I think this is, it is a challenge. Obviously, I'm an IT geek at heart myself, and I had exactly the same problem. So what I introduced when I was at Tollers as the head of IT there, we brought in a concept that every IT project had to have a business owner. So obviously there's some IT projects you do that nobody cares about, and 20 years ago, a good example of that would be upgrading your on-site Exchange server. It's one of those things you just need to do, and there's no point having a business owner. But wherever you've got anything that is impacting the business, and let's use my example of the conveyancing case management system. There is frankly no point putting a conveyancing case management system in unless the head of conveyancing is fully behind it. So if I was in that IT team and I had to introduce conveyancing case management, because actually quite often it's the management board will say, we do conveyancing, we're not making enough money, we need to put in case management and conveyancing. But actually, when you get to the department level, the department will say, no, thank you, we offer a bespoke, unique system service, and we don't want that. So what I would do at any project like that is I would engage with the people it's going to affect. I would create a stakeholder committee. Now, I hate the word committee, but sometimes they are a necessary evil. I would get, on my example, I would insist almost that the head of conveyancing, it becomes your business champion. They are then seen by the business as the person leading it, and effectively, without speaking out of terms, from within the IT department, you have a business person who you can put up as your straw man ahead of the IT change. And frankly, given the pressures within firms at the moment, the management board will then hold that partner to account to make sure that the project's working well. And if you aren't getting the response from that person, at least you have an escalation point to the management board saying, we're trying to implement case management, but head of conveyancing is not buying into the project. Can you help us? And it's about having that good and honest dialogue. So whenever an IT project comes along, business sponsor, creation of stakeholders, and what I would call peer pressure, if you like, from management in the firm to make sure the project is taken seriously. Sorry, long rambling answer, Anonymous. Hopefully that was
useful. That makes sense. And I think there's another question around sort of, all too often, I think a standard response is, oh, people hate change. Do you, in your view and in your experience, do you think it's people hate change, or do they just not enjoy the process of change? And how do we overcome that?
I'm not going to use the full thing here, but I think everyone will have heard the cliche: if you treat people like mushrooms, if you keep people in the dark, you don't give them good information, they're going to not like that experience. So change management actually starts right at the beginning of a project, and again, it's why that sitting down and working out exactly what you're going to do with the technology you're buying, because if you can clearly explain what it is you want, what it's going to do for the business, you actually have the start of your communication plan. You can let people know, and obviously there's things that are confidential and you have to do timing right, but then you have a reason for why you're doing something and what it's going to do for the firm. And the sooner you can get that into the common psyche, that people understand why the project is happening, what the end results are going to be, then they will adapt to the change better. And one of the tactics that I always recommend with projects we're running, if it's a new product, we will do things like have a selection committee, which have people throughout the business. So views are gathered and fed back, and that's an unofficial communication channel. But once the decision's made, and we've got the final two, we'll have open demos so people can see what's going on and get involved. Before go live, we'll be doing sort of, again, demos and training. So it's about identifying in your project what touch points you can have with your clients, as it were, who are going to be the end users of the solution throughout. Because again, I think it is a cliche that people don't like change. People don't like having things done to them. That doesn't mean they can't see that things are better if they're done in a different way or with a different product.
Do you think it's important that, for the vendor to expectation manage, I suppose, but also I think your point around leaders making sure that they take control and staying positive is crucial. And I've experienced that myself, where you've got managers, sort of talking negatively about a particular project. Is that expectation management also on the leaders within firms to manage downwards as well?
Very much so. I mean, that one comment really can destroy a project before it even goes live. So I think it's going back to that example of conveyancing. I worked with a firm who identified the fact it needed, the management team identified the fact it needed to change the way it does case man, and in that case the head of conveyancing just said, it's not for me, everyone else can deal with it. And as soon as he said that, the rest of his team thought, well, why should we bother? So it is really important. And I think in a partnership, it's for especially in the smaller firms, say you've got 8 to 10 equity partners, it's so those partners should hold each other accountable for leading on IT projects. IT is so integrated into how businesses run or how they could run. It's almost a duty of the equity group. They don't have to understand all of the low-level detail, but they should be able to all understand why they're investing on technology, what the rewards of doing that are, and looking each other in the eye saying, yes, we're doing everything we can do to support this project. And obviously, the smaller the firm, the easier that is. But at that equity level, there needs to be accountability for any of those major investments in IT.
Thank you very much. I think that's the end of the questions. I'm just going to check here. Sorry, apologies. There's another question here. Project requirements, Moscow, must have, should have, could have, would have. You need to get the internal requirements documented and know what is absolutely needed and where there is wriggle room. So it's actually more of a comment, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, thanks for that comment. We use Moscow framework for all of our selection purposes. It's a great framework, it is very, very well assured in the width for the chapter in a week when you actually look down and say, we absolutely will not buy the system if it does not do this. It's a very good way of the selection committee, or the selection process of evaluating competitive suppliers. And if one of those systems can't do something, you take a view on actually, did we really, really, really want that or not? At the end of the day, but at least you know where you are. And the other thing we do with our Moscow is we always embed them into the contract. So if a supplier says they do these things and then it turns out they don't, they have to rep and do that. And that has helped several of our clients so much over the years when 6 months after go live, you know, a minor piece of functionality which is forgotten about suddenly becomes an issue, and the supplier says, oh, we don't do that, and then we go, actually, you said you do, and the RTT, now go away and fix it, please. It's fantastic.
Good. I think that's all the rest of the questions. So I think it just remains for me to say thanks to everyone who's attended today.
Yes.
We will a couple of slides, and a huge thank you to David for taking time out of his day to present on what I feel is a very informative webinar. So thanks to everyone, and at that point I will close us off and close us down. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Bye.